The scent of my homemade apple pie, the one with the complex lattice crust that always took 2 hours, was the only thing anchoring me to reality at the Harrington estate that Sunday. We gathered there for dinner every week, a performance piece in extreme wealth and strained familial silence. The mahogany dining table, easily seating 20, swallowed the 4 of us whole. Nicholas Harrington, my father-in-law and the CEO of Harrington Tech, held court at the head, a monolithic figure of power whose crystal tumbler of scotch caught the sunset filtering through Eleanor's prized Viennese chandelier. "Another record quarter for Harrington Tech," Nicholas boomed, his voice carrying the weight of a dividend announcement. He paused, letting the silence magnify his achievement. "We dominate the market because I recognize talent and position it where it belongs." His hand landed on Taylor's shoulder, my husband, with a heavy, proprietary weight. Taylor, poor man, glowed under the attention, his contribution to the company consisting mostly of inheriting the right surname and nodding vigorously during meetings he never truly grasped. I smiled faintly, peeling the skin from my perfectly cooked salmon, avoiding eye contact. No one mentioned the massive client contract I'd salvaged last month, working 3 consecutive weekends, or the catastrophic financial analysis that I'd spotted and corrected just 2 days prior. While Nicholas was likely at his exclusive country club, detecting notes of oak and self-importance in his 30-year-old whiskey, I was the one rebuilding our entire security protocol after a nearly fatal breach. That was the unwritten rule of the Harrington dynasty. The women and the unnamed workers fixed the disasters, and Nicholas took the credit. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, finally broke the silence, her fingers heavy with enough diamond carats to pay my entire department's salary for a year. "You look tired, dear," she murmured, her voice barely a graze on my shoulder. "Appearance matters, especially for women in leadership. Perhaps consider a better work-life balance." I swallowed the insult along with the salmon. I looked tired because I had slept 4 hours in the last 72, but admitting the sheer scale of my effort would only validate their unspoken belief that I was an outsider, perpetually overwhelmed, trying to swim in waters too deep for me. They saw my competence not as an asset, but as an exhausting, somewhat vulgar display of trying too hard. Taylor, oblivious, had only one thing on his mind that evening: my upcoming promotion. "The board meeting is set for next Tuesday, right?" "That's when you'll hear Cass," he asked later, as we drove the 20 minutes back to our own substantial, yet noticeably smaller, house in the suburbs of Greenwich, Connecticut. "That's the date," I confirmed, focusing on the dark highway. "Dad's been really impressed with Nina Blackwood lately," Taylor continued, shifting uncomfortably. "She's been staying late, taking on extra projects." I bit back a sharp response. Nina Blackwood, the same Nina I had been mentoring for 3 months, at Nicholas's specific request. The one who arrived at 9:30 a.m. sharp and left promptly at 5 p.m. Nina, whom I had patiently walked through every intricate system architecture, every client relationship detail, every confidential strategy, all because Nicholas claimed she just needs mentoring. I shared my playbook with the patience of a kindergarten teacher explaining addition. Nina took meticulous notes in her designer portfolio, asking questions that, in retrospect, felt less like eagerness and more like a detailed interrogation. "How do you handle system failures? What's your backup protocol? Who has administrative access?" I had dismissed it as ambitious curiosity. I thought she was eager to learn. The truth, as I would soon discover, was she was building a meticulous, calculated case against me. She wasn't an apprentice. She was a saboteur. The sheer Shocking simplicity of the betrayal made my blood run cold, even weeks before it happened. The air in the car, thick with Taylor's casual betrayal and the scent of expensive cologne, felt suffocating. I realized then that my exhaustion wasn't just physical. It was the fatigue of perpetually performing for people who never wanted me to succeed in the first place. My entire professional identity, 6 years of relentless sacrifice, was about to be weaponized against me by the very people I was sacrificing it for. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of escalating tension and creeping paranoia. The executives in the hallways were quieter, the security guards avoided eye contact, and Taylor kept bringing up Nina's impressive work with increasing frequency. I pushed it all down, focusing on the massive server migration that was scheduled for the upcoming Tuesday, the day of the board meeting. 40 terabytes, an 8-hour window, zero margin for error. It was set to be my moment of professional vindication. It turned out to be the perfect setup for my professional execution. I should have listened to my gut the second the elevator felt too silent. That metallic, airless box was already carrying me toward my fate. 2 weeks out from the board meeting, the marital disconnect between Taylor and me became a painful routine. Every morning started the same way in our immaculate kitchen. Him fumbling with the ridiculously expensive espresso machine his parents had gifted us, creating coffee that always tasted faintly of burnt regret, while scrolling aimlessly through financial news on his phone. "Big week ahead," he commented that Tuesday, 2 weeks before the implosion. I should hear about my new role today. I looked up from my laptop, my fingers already flying across the keyboard, managing a critical firewall update before 7 a.m. "Write the role," I replied, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. He took a large, unsatisfying sip of his latte. "Dad mentioned Nina's been really impressive lately, taking on a ton of extra projects." He said it like Nina was achieving something miraculous, not simply doing the bare minimum after 5 p.m. I watched his reflection tense slightly in the glass of the microwave door. My fingers froze on the keyboard. Nina Blackwood, the woman I was teaching, the woman whose designer portfolio was filled with my proprietary knowledge. She just needed mentoring, Taylor had said, quoting his father. Someone to show her how we handle things here. So I had. I'd opened my playbook, shared every system architecture, explained our intricate client relationships, all with a genuine belief that competence was something to be shared and cultivated. In hindsight, I was handing the enemy the detailed schematics to the castle I had built. Nina's questions were increasingly invasive. How do you handle system failures? What is the failover mechanism for the primary client database? Who has administrative access for the emergency backups? I had thought she was eager. I thought she was ambitious. I thought wrong. She was taking inventory, building a checklist for my replacement. The shock was not that she was ambitious. The shock was that Nicholas and Taylor saw my generosity as naivety and my competence as a threat to their masculine, inherited power structure. Then came the server migration crisis, 7 days before the board meeting. 40 terabytes of mission-critical data needed to be moved in an 8-hour window with zero downtime. Everything that could possibly go wrong did. Corrupted files, failed backup sequences, a power surge that should have been technically impossible given our redundancies. By 10 p.m., I had activated my emergency protocol, summoning my entire team. Logan Mitchell, my second in command, arrived first, still wearing the program from his daughter Emma's dance recital pinned to his lapel. "She understood, Cass," he'd said quietly, though I caught him checking the videos his wife sent from the auditorium. Priya Sharma came next, apology heavy in her voice as she called her husband. I know it's our anniversary dinner. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Then she dove into the code like she was defusing a nuclear weapon. Marcus Thompson, Sarah Kim, the Jackson twins who seemed to communicate in a telepathic programming language, they all came. Without question, the 15th floor conference room became our bunker, littered with laptops, Red Bull cans, and cold Chinese takeout that went uneaten. We're like some weird, dysfunctional family, Marcus joked at 2 a.m., attempting to eat General Tso's with one hand while typing with the other. Yeah, but at least we chose each other, Sarah replied, and the words hung in the air, prophetic and heavy. We saved everything. Every file, every client, every contract. Nicholas, vacationing in the Hamptons, would never know we had been 3 keystrokes away from losing millions in data and client trust. I solved catastrophes so quietly that no one at the executive level knew they'd happened. This was the problem. My competence made the job look easy, and the Harringtons believed that if it looked easy, it must not be valuable. The next afternoon, the fatal blow arrived. I was reviewing the crucial Henderson account files at 11:47 p.m., polishing my promotion presentation, when it appeared an email from Nina Blackwood titled simply, Update on Strategy. It was meant for Nicholas. It was accidentally sent to me. Nicholas, as discussed, I've successfully salvaged the Henderson situation. The client was thoroughly impressed with my crisis management. I believe it is time to discuss restructuring. She seems overwhelmed, arrives looking exhausted most mornings. Fresh leadership would benefit the department. My laptop screen blurred. I read it twice, then 3 times. The Henderson situation, the one I had personally managed while Nina was posting Instagram stories from a wine tasting event. The rescue I had orchestrated while she slept. I forwarded the entire chain to my personal, encrypted email address without thinking. Some cold, reptilian instinct for self-preservation kicked in. I finally understood that my dedication looked like weakness to those who had never genuinely had to work for anything. The stage was set. The microwave timer counting down my execution was already ticking. The morning of the board meeting, the morning of my scheduled promotion, started wrong from the moment I scanned my key card at 6:45 a.m. Tom, the security guard, usually chatty, avoided my eyes. The elevator felt too quiet, ascending to the 15th floor like a sealed coffin. The air up there was electric, thick with held breaths and unspoken knowledge. I reached the conference room, my presentation clicker already in hand, ready to showcase the department's 340% efficiency increase. Nina was already there, sitting in my chair, the one I'd claimed 3 years ago because it faced away from the blinding morning sun. Her laptop was open to a spreadsheet I instantly recognized. My department's confidential budget projections, the ones located on a secured server that she should have had absolutely no access to. "Oh, good morning," she chirped, the saccharine sweetness coating her words like artificial sweetener. "Nicholas asked me to review these before the meeting. You don't mind, do you?" The question wasn't a question. I stood there, my laptop bag suddenly heavy on my shoulder, watching her scroll through 6 years of carefully built financial architecture, salary allocations, project budgets, vendor contracts. I felt sick, but a chilling clarity descended. "How did you get access to those files, Nina?" I asked, my voice dangerously level. She looked up then, and for a fleeting second, the mask slipped. Pure, unadulterated satisfaction flickered across her features before the innocent smile returned. Nicholas gave me temporary admin privileges, Cass, to help with the transition. The word transition hung between us like a diagnosis. The room began to fill, but wrong. David Park from finance arrived first, clutching his tablet like a shield, not meeting my eyes. Then came Margaret Lawson, our legal director, who normally radiated composure, but today kept checking her phone, gripping her legal pad with white knuckles. Even the coffee was wrong. No one had started the expensive machine. There was only silence and the faint smell of fierce, expensive cologne barely masking nervous sweat. I started my presentation anyway, clicked through slides detailing our metrics, our achievements, our wins. My voice stayed steady, even as I felt the room's energy darkening, preparing for something I couldn't quite name. As you can see, we've exceeded every target by... The door didn't just open. It exploded inward, the handle cracking against the drywall hard enough to leave a mark. Nicholas stood there, his face the particular shade of hypertensive red I knew so well. His custom Italian suit looked disheveled. His expensive tie was crooked. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his palm hitting the mahogany table with the force of a thunderclap. Margaret's coffee jumped, spilling a pool of brown liquid across her legal pad, but she didn't move to clean it. "You have 5 minutes to clear your desk," Nicholas spat, his voice devoid of all warmth. The words didn't make sense at first. They existed in the air, but my brain refused to process them. I stood there, the presentation clicker still in my hand, slide 17. A graph showing the money I'd saved this company, still glowing on the screen behind me. Then, with the terrifying precision of a bomb detonating in slow motion, I understood the choreography of this morning. Why Nina had my files. Why the executives avoided eye contact. Why Margaret looked ready to cry or run. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned, orchestrated. I had been marked for execution, and everyone except me had known it was coming. Nina leaned back in my chair. I saw it then, the slight, triumphant upturn of her lips. She thought she had won. But here's what 6 years in high-stakes tech had taught me. The moment you think you've won is precisely when you are most vulnerable. I set down the presentation clicker with deliberate, almost meditative calm. My grandmother's voice, the one who survived the Depression and raised 6 kids alone, echoed in my head. "When they expect you to break," she told me once, her hands never trembling, "that's when you stand straightest." A genuine feeling of relief washed over me. The crushing weight of having to pretend the Harringtons accepted me was gone. 6 years of saving his company, only to be given this public, vile humiliation. I looked at Nicholas, at his furious, expecting face. "Thank you," I said. My voice was clear, the gratitude utterly sincere. He'd expected tears, begging, or rage. He got grace. His jaw went slack. The first crack in the facade of his certainty had appeared. Nicholas's jaw hung open. He looked less like an all-powerful CEO and more like a puppet whose strings had just been cut. He had anticipated the drama, the breakdown, the satisfying sight of his daughter-in-law crumbling under his professional cruelty. My quiet, sincere thank you was a disruption to his script, a shocking twist that destabilized the entire boardroom. The executives remained frozen in their seats, exchanging glances that ranged from disbelief to outright fear. David Park, the CFO, was already calculating something on his tablet, his fingers moving with the frantic energy of a man watching money evaporate. Margaret Lawson, the legal director, had her phone out, typing with fingers that visibly trembled, her face the sickly gray-white of old. brittle paper. They understood the terrifying, expensive difference between firing someone quietly versus publicly humiliating them in front of witnesses, especially witnesses who worked in the highly volatile IT and finance departments. "For minutes," Nicholas called out, his voice sharp with manufactured authority, his Rolex glinting as he tapped its face. I walked toward my desk outside the conference room's glass walls. I continued packing with the methodical, almost surgical precision I used for writing system architectures. Each item was lifted, examined, and placed deliberately into the standard issue cardboard box that had materialized from somewhere. The backup drive, containing every system architecture I'd built for Harrington Tech when in first. Then the 6 years' worth of project files, the team photos, the chipped coffee mug. As I worked, Nicholas kept up his cadence, the count becoming less about timing me and more about reaffirming his own vanishing power. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. It was then I saw motion through the glass. Logan Mitchell, my loyal second-in-command, stood up from his desk. His laptop bag was already slung over his shoulder. He wasn't packing. He was already packed. Ready. 2 minutes, Nicholas's voice called out, but it seemed to come from underwater. Next, Priya stood up. Then Marcus. Sarah. The Jackson twins. One by one, like a slow-building, determined wave, my entire team began to rise from their desks. They didn't look at Nicholas or the executives. Their eyes were fixed on me, standing in the aisle with my cardboard box. Logan gave me a slight nod, a gesture of profound, silent communication. Nicholas turned, following my gaze to the glass wall. His face, which had been red with fury moments ago, went from furious red to a chilling, ashen white so fast I thought he might faint. Nina's triumphant smirk dissolved into pure, raw panic. The executives in the room, witnessing the slow-motion massacre of their technical infrastructure, averted their eyes. "Time's up," Nicholas choked out, but it came out as a panicked question. I picked up my box, its weight familiar yet strangely light. 6 years of my professional life reduced to what I could carry in my arms. As I walked toward the elevator bank, 2 security guards, Tom and Derek, appeared as standard protocol for terminations. They mumbled apologies as they approached. I knew their kids' names, had brought them coffee during late-night lockdowns. "I'm sorry about this, Ms. West," Tom whispered as he reached for my elbow. "Don't be, Tom," I told him, meeting his eyes. "You're just doing your job." We walked through the cubicle farm, and that's when the symphony of solidarity began. The squeak of 22 office chairs pushing back, the rustle of laptop bags being gathered, the soft thuds of closing devices. Logan fell into step beside me. Then Priya, her heels clicking a sharp, determined rhythm. Marcus, Sarah, the Jackson twins, all moving in perfect, synchronized silence. By the time we reached the bank of elevators, 22 people had joined my procession. Tom stopped, his hand dropping from my elbow. He looked at the line of highly specialized, irreplaceable talent that was walking away. "In 15 years, Ms. West," he said, his voice thick with a mixture of awe and respect, "I've never seen anything like this." Neither had Nicholas Harrington, whose empire had just started its catastrophic collapse. The elevator doors closed on 23 people, 22 colleagues, and 1 security guard who looked like he had just witnessed a miracle or a massacre. He wasn't sure which. Nobody spoke during the descent. The only sound was the mechanical hum and the sudden, insistent buzzing of Logan's phone. Then Priya's, then mine. Our phones erupted in a cascade of notifications. When the doors opened to the marble lobby, we walked out into the blazing midday sun of downtown Manhattan. the kind of light that makes everything look overexposed and surreal. The receptionist stood up so fast their chairs rolled backward into the wall. Gerald, the maintenance supervisor, stopped mopping and watched us file past. Someone started a slow clap from the loading dock, and then others joined in until the sound echoed off the polished concrete walls. "This is insane," Priya whispered beside me. "No," Logan corrected, adjusting his laptop bag. "This is justice." We stood in the harsh light of the parking lot for what felt like an eternity. 23 people, blinking, phones buzzing like angry wasps. The sheer, terrifying weight of what we had just done settled over us. We were all unemployed at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, yet the mood was not one of despair, but of shared, defiant liberation. The Jackson twins were already hunched over a shared laptop on the concrete median, typing furiously, likely already securing domain names. Sarah was pressed to her phone, explaining to her partner why they were suddenly down one income. "I should go," I finally said, the words feeling foreign. My car keys were clammy in my hand. "We all should," Marcus replied, but nobody moved. We stood there like survivors of a shipwreck, not quite ready to abandon the sight of the vessel going down in flames. It was in that moment, under the blazing sun, that I saw not colleagues but a family, a chosen family, and that recognition felt more valuable than any promotion Nicholas could have offered. The drive home to Greenwich took 17 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire way, unable to focus on the familiar stretch of I-95. My phone, tossed onto the passenger seat, continued its electronic seizure. 3 times I reached for it at a red light. 3 times I pulled my hand back, needing the space to simply breathe. Taylor's black Mercedes was in the driveway. Of course. He worked from home Tuesdays and Thursdays, a flexible luxury Nicholas had granted his son, but would never have considered for anyone else, especially not me, despite my longer tenure and critical expertise. I sat in my car for a full minute after turning off the engine, listening only to the tick of the cooling metal. The house, which we'd bought 3 years ago with a generous down payment from his parents, looked exactly the same. Same cherry tree in the yard. Same crack in the driveway we kept meaning to fix. Same life, except everything had changed. Taylor met me at the door, his laptop still clutched in one hand, pure confusion written across his face. "Why are you home? Are you sick?" Then he saw the cardboard box in my arms. His face cycled through a devastating series of expressions: confusion, concern, realization, then ultimately anger. "Dad called," he said, his voice flat, devoid of real emotion. "He says you lost it in the meeting. Says you were unstable. Started crying. Had to be escorted out by security." He was reciting a well-rehearsed script, one Nicholas must have delivered the moment the elevator doors closed. I set the box on our entryway table. The ornate antique Eleanor had gifted us, the one I'd always thought was too gaudy for the space. "Is that what he said?" He said, "You've been struggling lately, Cass. That Nina had to cover for your mistakes. That he had no choice." Taylor was pleading, not with me, but with the version of reality he desperately wanted to preserve. I pulled out my phone, ignoring the 100 other notifications, and found the forwarded email, Nina's email, the one claiming credit for the Henderson account, the one calling me overwhelmed, the one clearly part of a longer, nastier conversation with Nicholas that I hadn't been privy to. Taylor read it once, then again. His jaw muscle twitched, the tell he'd inherited from his father, which appeared whenever reality didn't match the preferred narrative. "This is he started, then stopped. When did she send this? 3 weeks ago. Accidentally sent to me instead of your father. I watched him, waiting for the flicker of defiance, the defense of his wife. And you didn't tell me. The silence stretched between us like a contested, hostile border. Would you have believed me, Taylor? Or would you have said Nina made an honest mistake, that your father would never plot against his own daughter-in-law? He ran both hands through his hair, another inherited, dramatic gesture. He set down his laptop. I need to think, he said, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. I just need to think. Taylor. But he was already gone, the door closing with a definitive click that sounded like punctuation. I stood in my work clothes, surrounded by the life we built on a foundation that had just been exposed as nothing but sand. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. Exhaustion and morbid curiosity made me swipe accept. Please don't hang up, a voice barely above a whisper said. It was Margaret Lawson. I'm calling from the executive bathroom on the 16th floor, the one nobody uses. Margaret, why are you calling me? I asked, my voice dropping, adrenaline flooding my system once more. Your contract. The clause about hostile termination. Margaret's words tumbled out like water breaking through a dam. Nicholas never read it. Legal reviewed it 6 years ago when you were hired, but he just signed where I told him to sign. She was speaking in frantic, clipped sentences. The humiliation multiplier alone puts your severance at $800,000. But with documented harassment, the public nature of it, 22 witnesses, Cassidy, we're looking at millions. Millions. Why are you telling me this, Margaret? I pressed, listening to the sound of running water in the background, presumably masking her voice, because in about an hour, Nicholas is going to realize what he's done, and when he does, he's going to blame me. Say I should have warned him. I've worked here 12 years. I've covered for his temper, his blatant favoritism, his questionable ethical decisions. But this is going to end my career, too. I can't let him take me down with him. Can we meet tomorrow? Somewhere nobody from Harrington Tech would ever go. I have documentation. Things you should know. Things that might help us both. The line clicked dead before I could respond. I stood there, phone still in hand, when the doorbell rang. It was 9 p.m. Eleanor Harrington stood on my porch. She was holding a manila folder like it might bite her, her perfect society makeup slightly smudged. For the first time in 6 years, Eleanor looked fragile. She wasn't the polished society matron who commanded charity boards and country club committees. She was a woman carrying a weight she could no longer bear alone. May I come in? She asked. Taylor's not here, I said, stepping aside. I know, she replied, stepping into the entryway. I waited until I saw him leave. She followed me to the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch, as if prepared to flee at any moment. She clutched the manila folder like a confession. Nicholas fired his own brother this way 20 years ago, Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly steady now. Edward. He was CFO, had been with the company since the beginning. Edward questioned one of Nicholas's decisions publicly. Not even criticized, just questioned. Nicholas gave him 10 minutes to clear out. The family never recovered. Edward's wife left him. His kids won't speak to Nicholas. 20 years, and the wound still bleeds at every holiday dinner. She opened the folder, revealing yellowed board meeting minutes, old emails printed on paper that had softened with age, financial records. It was a history of brutality. Why are you telling me this now, Eleanor? I asked, sinking onto the opposite armchair. Eleanor's laugh was brittle, nothing like her usual musical society trill. Because I've watched my husband destroy people for decades, Cassidy, telling myself it was business, that successful men had to be ruthless. But watching him do it to you, someone who saved his company while he was playing golf, someone who made my son happy, even if we never showed it, I can't pretend anymore. She pulled out more paper. 5 years ago, Michelle Reeves, VP of Marketing, fired in a board meeting for insubordination. She suggested Nicholas's strategy was outdated. Another paper. 3 years ago, James Chin, head of innovation, terminated publicly because he'd received a job offer from a competitor, and Nicholas wanted to make an example. They choose the easy path, Eleanor continued, finally looking directly at me, her gray eyes dark with sorrow. Nicholas and Taylor both. They avoid internal conflict by creating external, bigger conflicts. They'd rather destroy relationships than admit fault. I've enabled it for 35 years, Cassidy, and I'm so sorry. Her hug was unexpected, fierce and brief. It was the first genuine warmth I'd ever received from her. She stood up, placed the folder on my coffee table, and disappeared into the night, leaving me with evidence of a destructive pattern I'd been too close to see. The matriarch of the Harrington dynasty, the embodiment of social poise, had just defected. I was left with a horrifying yet empowering realization. The man I was fighting was a serial abuser of power, and now even his own family was willing to testify against him. I finally collapsed on the couch, still in my work clothes, the evidence of Nicholas's toxic history spread across the coffee table like a crime scene. I drifted off, caught between exhaustion and adrenaline, only to be violently pulled awake at 2:07 a.m. by my phone. It was Margaret Lawson. "Please, tell me you're awake." Margaret's voice was high-pitched, hysterical, the composure I'd admired for years completely shattered. "I am now, Margaret. What is it?" Nina destroyed everything. She tried to prove she could handle your systems. Wanted to show Nicholas she didn't need the transition period. Margaret gasped, the sound ragged. She was trying to access the primary backup system, your system, Cassidy, but instead she executed a full delete on the main customer database. The entire thing is gone. I sat up, suddenly, terrifyingly awake. She deleted the entire customer database? How is that even possible? That's not the worst part. She tried to recover it herself. Didn't call the external team. Didn't follow protocol. She ran some cheap recovery software she found online. It corrupted everything. The entire East Coast operation has been dark for 6 hours. They're estimating 14 hours minimum before even partial restoration. The silence stretched as I processed the gravity of this disaster. Our customer database wasn't just names and addresses. It was 17 years of relationship management, purchase histories, custom configurations, support tickets, the DNA of the company's client relationships. Losing it was akin to ripping out the spine of a Fortune 500 company. "How much, Margaret?" I asked, my voice chillingly calm. Conservative estimate? $50 million in immediate losses. That's not counting the clients we'll lose, the lawsuits, the reputation damage. Margaret's voice cracked completely. She's been in the executive bathroom, crying for 2 hours. Nicholas has been screaming at everyone. He threw a laptop, Cassidy. Actually threw it at the wall. Security is on standby. I felt something I hadn't expected. Nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. just a cold, empty vacuum. Nina had engineered my humiliation, and now she was drowning in her own raw, catastrophic incompetence. Margaret, you need to document everything, I said, the professional in me taking over. Every email, every action, every word Nicholas says. Already am. I'm creating my own insurance policy. She paused, the weight of the moment pressing through the phone line. Your team could have prevented this, Cassidy. My team wouldn't have caused it in the first place, I replied, hanging up the phone. I sat in the dark, watching the first light of sunrise creep across my living room walls. Somewhere across town, Harrington Tech was hemorrhaging money and reputation, while Nina learned that taking credit and taking responsibility were vastly different things. Taylor came home at 7 a.m. He looked like he'd slept in his car. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair stood at odd angles, and he reeked faintly of whiskey and regret. The database is gone, he said without preamble. I heard. Dad's lost his mind. He's threatening to sue Nina, but legal says he can't because he gave her the access. He's calling emergency board meetings. Mom's had 2 panic attacks. He collapsed on the couch beside me, careful not to touch me. He wants me to convince you to sign an NDA and make this go away quietly. He's offering the $800,000 Margaret mentioned. Full severance, extended benefits, glowing recommendation. All you have to do is sign saying you won't discuss what happened or compete for 2 years. Make what go away, Taylor. His public humiliation of me, the 22 people who walked out, or the fact that his chosen replacement just cost the company $50 million. Taylor rubbed his face with both hands, defeated. All of it. The board is threatening his position. If you sue, if this gets worse, he could lose everything. I turned to look at my husband, really look at him. He was a stranger wearing Taylor's face. He should have thought of that before he gave me 5 minutes to clear my desk. I need you to fix this, he whispered, his eyes wide and pleading. Those 5 words hung between us like a blade. Not, I'm sorry. Not, he was wrong. Just another demand for me to sacrifice my dignity for the Harrington family's comfort. I need you to leave, Taylor, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. He saw it then, the awareness that he'd chosen the wrong side. But Harringtons didn't admit mistakes. They just retreated. He left without another word, the sound of his car pulling away marking the definitive end of our marriage. By noon, my living room had transformed into a bustling, chaotic startup incubator. 22 people, my former colleagues, my chosen family, were scattered everywhere. Laptops balanced on knees, bodies perched on chair arms, crowded around my dining table. Logan's 12-year-old daughter, Emma, sat in the corner doing homework, occasionally looking up at the beautiful chaos with curious eyes. Phoenix Digital, Priya announced, holding up a napkin where she'd sketched a stylized bird rising from flames. We're not subtle, but neither was that walkout. Marcus was already securing the domain name and social media handles. I'm also grabbing variations before Harrington Tech decides to hire someone competent enough to think of cyber squatting, he quipped. His partner, James, appeared with a tray of gourmet coffee mugs. I made a supply run. Nobody builds a unicorn on empty stomachs. The Jackson twins had somehow created a sophisticated project management system on my living room wall using color-coded sticky notes. Sarah was already reaching out to her vast network of contacts, her phone voice professional despite sitting cross-legged on my Persian rug. The energy was electric, desperate, hopeful, galvanized. We weren't just colleagues anymore. We were refugees from a corporate disaster, building something new from the ashes of what Nicholas had destroyed. In that crowded, chaotic living room, I felt more at home than I had in 6 years living under the Harrington shadow. My phone buzzed at 4:47 p.m., 3 days after the walkout. A sleek, white Tesla pulled into the parking lot of the derelict warehouse we'd tentatively secured yesterday. Catherine Walsh, the venture capitalist who had turned down Nicholas's pitch 6 months ago, telling him his company lacked innovative, loyal leadership, stepped out. Her designer heels clicked against the cracked asphalt as she surveyed the space. The warehouse was 20,000 square feet of concrete impossibility, smelling faintly of industrial cleaner and the ghost of whatever had been manufactured here before. Fluorescent lights flickered intermittently. The loading dock door didn't close properly. There was a suspicious, multi-hued stain on the floor that looked like it had its own ecosystem. "This is perfect," Catherine announced, and she wasn't being sarcastic. "It's a disaster," Priya countered, gesturing at a ceiling tile that chose that moment to release a small shower of dust. "No, it's hungry space. It wants to become something." Catherine walked the perimeter, her footsteps echoing. "You know what Amazon's first office was? A garage. Google? Also a garage. You've upgraded. You have walls and everything." She pulled out her phone, made a quick, decisive call. "Send the contract to my email." "Yes, the full amount." She looked at me, her eyes piercing. $3.5 million in seed funding. I want 20% equity and a board seat. Logan nearly dropped his laptop. "You haven't even seen our business plan." "I've seen 22 people follow their leader out of a stable job into uncertainty. That's worth more than any PowerPoint pitch." She paused at the door, delivering her own shocking twist. "Nicholas Harrington once told me that emotional decisions have no place in business. He said it while rejecting my proposal to invest in Harrington Tech Funny, how his emotional decision to publicly humiliate you just handed me the next unicorn." The next morning, Catherine returned with 2 other VCs. They toured our beautiful disaster of a warehouse, asked pointed questions about scalability, and committed another $2 million on the spot. We hadn't even incorporated yet, and we were valued at $17.5 million. The phone call that mattered came that afternoon, not from a lawyer, but from Richard Henderson himself, CEO of Henderson Corp., one of Harrington Tech's most valuable clients. "I heard about the situation at Harrington Tech," he said without preamble. "I also heard about the database disaster. Nina Blackwood tried to explain to me yesterday why our configurations were lost. She cried, Cassidy. Actually cried on a client call. Mr. Henderson, we worked with your team for 3 years. Logan rebuilt your entire architecture over a weekend. Priya identified data patterns that increased your efficiency by 200%. He paused. The contracts follow the talent, Ms. West, not the building. We're moving our business to Phoenix Digital, effective immediately. By the end of the day, 3 more clients had called: Patterson Industries, Morrison Group, and Chin Technologies. Together, they represented $30 million in annual contracts. Each one announced their decision on LinkedIn. The professional corporates speak, barely disguising their distaste for how Harrington Tech had treated us. The news was out. Nicholas Harrington had lost more than an employee. He had lost the foundation of his company. The success of Phoenix Digital was a whirlwind of activity, fueled by caffeine, adrenaline, and the shared, intoxicating goal of building something genuinely good. We had relocated from my living room to the warehouse, now buzzing with life. We were unpacking equipment, setting up desks, actual secondhand desks bought from a failed startup liquidation sale, when Taylor appeared in the doorway. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. He had lost weight, but not in a healthy way. More like grief had been eating him from the inside. In his hand, he held a bouquet of roses. Red roses. After 6 years of marriage, he still didn't know I was allergic to them, that I preferred wild flowers, that I'd told him this on our 3rd date. "Can we talk?" he asked, shifting his weight, uncomfortable in his pressed khakis and polo shirt. His father's uniform, adopted without question. I stepped outside with him, leaving my team inside to continue building our future. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot's cracked asphalt. "Dad's willing to apologize," Taylor said, thrusting the roses at me like a peace offering or perhaps a shield. I didn't take them. "He'll give you an executive position, corner office, 20% raise, full restoration of benefits." I remained silent, watching the roses hover between us. "He thinks this is about office space. It's a good offer, Cass. More than fair, considering." Considering what, Taylor? That he humiliated me? That Nina destroyed the database, trying to prove she could do my job? That 22 people walked out because they witnessed something unconscionable? Taylor set the roses on the ground between us. They looked sad there, dying slowly on the hot asphalt. "He's my father, Cass, and I was your husband." Past tense, Taylor. You made that past tense the moment you asked me to swallow humiliation for your family's comfort. His face crumpled slightly, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in days. "You're giving up on us, on our marriage." "Your father didn't break us," I countered, my voice low and firm. "You did, when you came home and asked me to fix his mistake instead of standing by me. When you chose the easy path of family loyalty over the hard path of doing what was right." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I saw the man I had fallen in love with. The one who had existed before his father's influence calcified around him like armor. But that man had been buried so long, resurrection wasn't possible anymore. "I should go," he said quietly. "Yes." He walked back to his car, the BMW his father had bought him, and drove away. The red roses remained on the asphalt. I left them there. By evening, they had wilted in the heat, petals scattering in the wind like all of Nicholas's carefully laid plans. The conversation felt less like a confrontation and more like signing the final separation papers of our life together. At midnight, my phone buzzed with an encrypted file from Margaret Lawson. The subject line read simply, "My severance package." The audio file was 43 minutes of a Harrington Tech board meeting, recorded with chilling, crystal clarity. Margaret had placed her phone strategically near the center of the table. The board meeting audio, Margaret's ultimate insurance policy, provided the shocking, visceral confirmation of everything I had suspected. I sat alone in my new warehouse office, the voices of the most powerful people at Harrington Tech filling the industrial space at 1 a.m. $50 million, a voice I recognized as board member Jonathan Cross announced. The disgust palpable. He cost us $50 million because he couldn't control his temper. "The database is completely corrupted," CFO David Sterling's voice confirmed. Nina Blackwood had no authorization to access those systems. Nicholas gave her full administrative access, Margaret's voice countered, carefully neutral, cutting through the chaos. This was explicitly against my legal advisement. Then came the shocking detail, delivered by a voice dripping with disgust. "You promoted your girlfriend's roommate Harrington? Christina's roommate from college? That's who you thought could replace your daughter-in-law, who built half our infrastructure. Nicholas's voice, when it finally came, sounded hollow, defeated. Nina showed promise. She was eager, ambitious. She was unqualified. Another board member spat. The slam of a hand on the table echoed like a physical blow. This isn't some family drama, Harrington. You turned a personal vendetta into a $50 million disaster. Maybe more if the clients keep leaving. I listened to the recording one more time. The final words hung heavy in the air. This isn't leadership. It's a temper tantrum that cost us $50 million. The collective disgust in their voices was palpable. Nicholas had always been ruthless, but this time his cruelty was both public and catastrophically expensive. The next morning, everything accelerated. "We're doing a press conference," Catherine Walsh announced, striding into our warehouse at 7 a.m. with a media consultant. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Every tech outlet is begging for a statement. We give them one." "I don't want to seem vindictive," I said. "You won't," Catherine assured me. "You'll seem like exactly what you are, a leader who refused to accept humiliation as the price of employment." Meanwhile, Nicholas is holding his own conference at Harrington Tech headquarters at the exact same time. The thought of Nicholas spinning this disaster into corporate doublespeak should have angered me. Instead, I felt oddly calm. Let him try to polish this catastrophe. The truth had a way of showing through no matter how much corporate varnish you applied. We spent the next 24 hours preparing. Logan and Priya helped write my statement. Sarah coordinated logistics. The Jackson twins somehow got us a professional backdrop and lighting that made our warehouse look like a legitimate tech startup. At 1:45 p.m. the next day, I stood in front of the cameras, wearing the same navy blazer I'd worn that Tuesday. Deliberately, all 22 members of my team flanked me. We looked like what we were, individuals who had chosen to stand together. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice steadier than my pulse. 2 weeks ago, Nicholas Harrington gave me 5 minutes to clear my desk after 6 years of building Harrington Tech's infrastructure. Those 5 minutes taught me something valuable, that competence threatens the incompetent, that loyalty means nothing to those who never earned it, and that sometimes the best thing that can happen is being forced to leave a place that never valued you. The cameras clicked like digital rain. "Phoenix Digital isn't just a company," I continued. "It's proof that culture beats strategy, that teams built on respect outperform hierarchies built on fear. We've secured $5.5 million in funding. We've retained clients worth $30 million annually. We've done in 2 weeks what Harrington Tech claimed would take years because we have something they lost: trust." Meanwhile, my phone was lighting up with texts from people watching Nicholas's simultaneous conference. Margaret sent a play-by-play. He's sweating through his makeup. Nina is behind him, looking at her phone, literally job hunting during the press conference. He just said strategic restructuring for enhanced agility, and a reporter laughed out loud. A screenshot from Bloomberg flashed on my screen. They were showing both conferences on split screen. Me, calm and surrounded by my composed team. Nicholas, red-faced and stammering with Nina beside him, scrolling through LinkedIn. The stock ticker ran beneath both feeds. Harrington Tech, down another 8%. Chapter 11. The Fall of the Patriarch. We were still celebrating that evening when my phone rang from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe accept. "Please don't hang up." It was Nina Blackwood. The voice was different, Gone was the sugar-sweet coating, the practiced professionalism. She sounded young, desperate, frightened. "I know you hate me," she whispered. "I don't hate you, Nina," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "I nothing you." A sharp intake of breath. "I've been terminated. Strategic differences, they called it. But everyone knows it means I destroyed the database. I'm being blacklisted. Nobody will even interview me." She was crying now. Ugly sobs that reminded me she was only 26, ambitious and ruthless, but still young enough to believe those were the only qualities that mattered. "I have student loans, rent, my mom's medical bills. She has a serious illness, and I'm her only support. And her voice cracked completely. "I know I took credit for your work. I know what I did. But please, just one recommendation. Just something that says I'm not completely incompetent." I looked around our warehouse, at my team still working despite the late hour, at the whiteboards covered with actual innovation instead of corporate buzzwords. "Nina," I said, and she fell silent except for sniffles. "You took credit for the Henderson account. You called me overwhelmed and suggested I needed to be replaced. You smiled while Nicholas gave me 5 minutes to pack 6 years of work." I paused. "You took credit for others' work. Now you need to take credit for your own failure. That's the only recommendation I can give you." The call lasted exactly 5 minutes. I timed it. 3 days later, the news broke everywhere at once. Nicholas Harrington steps down as CEO of Harrington Tech. The press release was a masterpiece of corporate euphemism, pursuing new opportunities, time for fresh leadership, grateful for his years of service. But everyone knew the truth. The board had given him a choice: resign with a fraction of his dignity intact, or be fired for cause and lose everything. He chose resignation, but it was like choosing which cliff to jump from. The ending was the same. Eleanor called me that evening, her voice hollow, but somehow lighter. "He's moving to the guest house," she said. 35 years of marriage, and this is what finally broke us. Not his affairs with secretaries, not his ego that needed its own zip code, but watching him destroy you, someone who'd done nothing but make him successful, purely for sport. That's when I knew the man I married was gone, if he ever existed. "Eleanor, don't apologize. Don't comfort me. This is freedom, Cassidy, even if it comes 30 years too late." She stirred her expensive coffee with deliberate calm. I excused his cruelty as strength, his affairs as stress relief, his destruction of people's careers as business necessities. But watching him destroy you, someone who'd done nothing but succeed, purely because he could, that was when I understood I'd been enabling a monster. She pulled out her phone, showing me a photo of legal documents. "I filed for divorce this morning. Served him papers at the country club during the monthly board meeting. Maximum witnesses, maximum humiliation." The matriarch was finally free. She paused, and her next words hit me with the force of poetry. "The Harrington dynasty took 3 generations to build, Cassidy. Nicholas destroyed it in 5 minutes. The very 5 minutes he gave you. There's poetry in that, don't you think?" As she walked away, I realized the Harrington empire hadn't just crumbled. It had imploded entirely. Nicholas lost his company, his reputation, his marriage, his legacy, all because he couldn't resist humiliating someone who'd done nothing but make him successful. The settlement negotiation was scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m., organized by Margaret Lawson. Neutral territory, she insisted, the Marriott Downtown Conference Room, 12. It cost $800 an hour, which Nicholas would be paying for. I arrived early, finding the room exactly as expensive and soulless as expected. Leather chairs that tried too hard, a table polished to a mirror brightness, windows overlooking a city Nicholas once thought he owned. He arrived 15 minutes late, a pathetic last-ditch power play that might have worked when he still had power to play with. But the man who walked in wasn't the Nicholas Harrington who'd slammed his palm on a boardroom table. This version looked deflated, his Armani suit hanging loose on a frame that had lost significant weight from stress. His lawyer, Robert Hoffman, looked equally exhausted, defeated before the negotiation even started. "Let's make this quick," Robert said, pulling out documents. "Mr. Harrington is prepared to offer $1.2 million, full benefits continuation for 24 months, and immediate vesting of all stock options." Margaret, now officially my chief legal officer for Phoenix Digital, leaned forward. Plus a written statement acknowledging that the termination was handled inappropriately and a non-disparagement clause that goes both ways. Nicholas's jaw clenched, that familiar tell, but he nodded. The man who never apologized, never admitted fault, was about to sign a document acknowledging his professional failure. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens on paper. Nicholas signed with a hand that trembled slightly, his signature smaller than the bold scroll I remembered. When he passed the document to me, our eyes met. No words were exchanged, but entire conversations happened in that silence. His eyes said, "You destroyed me." Mine replied, "You destroyed yourself." His said, "I gave you everything." Mine answered, "You gave me 5 minutes." As I endorsed the check, $1.2 million, more money than my parents had seen in their lifetime, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or vindication, just emptiness, the hollow feeling of winning a war that should never have been fought. Nicholas stood to leave, then paused at the door. For a moment, I thought he might speak, might finally say something real. But Harrington men didn't apologize. They just retreated to lick their wounds in private. After he left, Margaret pulled out her phone and showed me something that made my breath catch. Security footage from Harrington Tech, dated the day before Nicholas's resignation. "Tom from security sent this to me," she said. "He thought you should see it." The grainy footage showed Nicholas standing in what had been my office, now completely empty. The timestamp read 9:47 p.m. He was alone, speaking to the empty room, though the security camera didn't capture audio. "He stood there for 20 minutes, Margaret said. Tom could read his lips for part of it. He kept saying, I gave her 5 minutes. She took everything. "He's wrong," I said quietly. "He took everything from himself. I just refused to go down with his ship." Margaret nodded, placing her phone on the table. "Tom wanted you to know something else. He's the one who made sure the cameras captured everything that Tuesday. Every angle of the boardroom. The walkout. All of it," he said, watching Ms. West maintain her dignity, while Nicholas lost his mind, was the best thing I'd witnessed in 15 years of security work. The quiet acts of loyalty, Cassidy, they are the ones that save you. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Can you meet?" Important. I found her at a quiet, unpretentious coffee shop downtown. "I filed for divorce this morning," she said without preamble. "Served him papers at the country club. Maximum witnesses, maximum humiliation." "What about Taylor?" Eleanor's face darkened with sorrow, not anger. "Taylor chose his side. He could have stood by you. Instead, he asked you to absorb humiliation to keep his father comfortable. He's exactly what I raised him to be, a coward who mistakes compliance for loyalty." She took my hand. "Go build your empire, dear. I'm finally going to build a life for myself. The $1.2 million settlement check cleared the next day, sitting in my account feeling simultaneously like justice and blood money. 6 months ago, this would have been a fantasy. Now it was just a line item in a much larger story. Seed money for something that had already grown beyond my wildest expectations. The warehouse barely resembled the disaster we'd moved into half a year ago. The flickering fluorescents had been replaced with warm LED panels. The suspicious stain was gone, covered by industrial epoxy flooring that matched our logo colors. We had real furniture now. Standing desks, ergonomic chairs, even a kitchen that didn't smell like decades of neglect. Mom, look. Emma, Logan's daughter, called from what we designated as the homework corner. She held up her math test. 98%. Priya helped me with the formulas last week. This had become our rhythm. Emma did homework here after school. Logan worked nearby. The Jackson twins taught her coding basics. We weren't just a company. We become the family some of us never had. The support system corporate culture promised, but never delivered. $75 million valuation as of this morning. Marcus announced, updating our celebration board. Yes, we had one now. And Richardson Industries just signed. That's 40 employees and 12 major clients. 40 employees. People who had chosen us, not for the stability, but for the culture. They'd seen our press conference, heard about the walkout, knew exactly what we stood for. Every resume came with a note about wanting to work somewhere that valued people over profits. I was reviewing contracts when the door opened. Taylor stood there, looking like a ghost of the man I'd married. Grief had been eating him from the inside. In his hand were papers I recognized immediately. Divorce documents. We went to the nice break room. "I've been in therapy," he said, sitting across from me, the papers between us like a border we were about to formally recognize. Twice a week for 4 months. Learning about family dynamics, enmeshment, enabling. Terms I didn't even know existed when we got married. "That's good, Taylor." "I should have stood up for you." The words rushed out, building pressure. "That Tuesday when Dad humiliated you, I should have been in that boardroom defending you. I should have walked out with you. Instead, I came home and asked you to fix his mess. I chose comfort over courage." He pushed the papers toward me. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or another chance. I know that ship has sailed. I wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. What I threw away because I couldn't stand up to my father." We signed the papers in relative silence. "I hope you find someone who sees your worth immediately, Cass," he said, standing to leave. "Not after it's too late. Not after they've already lost you. Someone who stands up for you on Tuesday, not apologizes for it 6 months later." After he left, Margaret appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" "Yeah, just closing chapters. Thought you should see this." She showed me her phone. Nicholas's LinkedIn profile, updated that morning. Independent business consultant, working from an address I recognized as a strip mall on the outskirts of town. His latest post was about leadership through adversity and the importance of decisive action. 3 likes. 2 were clearly bot accounts, and 1 was from someone trying to sell him marketing services. "That's sad," I said. "That's consequences," Margaret corrected. "He works alone from a rented office above a tax preparation service. No clients, no prospects, no future in tech. His reputation is so toxic that even desperate startups won't touch him. He had infinite time now and nothing to fill it with. No employees to terrorize. No board to impress. just an empty office and LinkedIn posts that nobody read. That afternoon, we held our weekly all-hands meeting. Looking at the 40 people who'd chosen to build something with us, I thought about those 5 minutes, how they had seemed like an ending, but were actually a beginning. Nicholas had given me 5 minutes to pack up my professional life. In return, I'd gained a real family, a company built on respect, and the knowledge that when you refuse to accept humiliation, you often find dignity waiting on the other side. "Hey," Priya said, appearing beside me. "Catherine Walsh just called. Bloomberg wants to do a feature on us, the company that rose from a 5-minute firing." I smiled. "Tell them yes. But make sure they know we're not the story of a firing. We're the story of what happens when good people refuse to let small people make them smaller." The warehouse hummed with productive energy. Somewhere across town, Nicholas sat alone in his strip mall office, probably refreshing his LinkedIn to see if anyone had liked his latest post about resilience. The difference between us wasn't that I'd won and he'd lost. It was that I'd learned 5 minutes could build an empire, while he was still trying to understand how 5 minutes had destroyed one. The final lesson, whether you are 20 or 60, never let your self-worth be dictated by the limited vision of an insecure, small-minded person. True power lies not in the title you hold, but in the people who choose to stand with you when you lose it. It is never too late to reclaim your dignity or to choose freedom over comfort, a lesson Eleanor Harrington taught us all. I want to know your thoughts. Have you ever walked away from a toxic situation and found surprising freedom on the other side? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for reading and sharing this story of corporate karma and the power of chosen family.